Alright, it's time to install my fuel system on the truck. So my basic fuel system is going to be, so there's my engine, pretend it's my engine. I'm going to run stock fuel rails. I'm going to run my 98 and up gas tank. Going to run my 99 to 02 Silverado pump assembly. Then I'm going to run stock hard lines from a 98 plus S10 because those have push locks on the end. Then to connect my stock rails to my stock hardline, I'm going to make some PTFE flex line. It's going to be 6AN with all 6AN fittings. So that's my basic overview. First thing I need to do is fix my gas tank. Bought it at the junkyard and it's got a hole in it. So I've got to make that hole disappear. Here's all the parts I'll be using to install my fuel system. So I've got my 98 and up S10 tank, my 99 to 02 Silverado fuel pump assembly, and this line is off the same vehicle I pulled the tank, 98 plus, and what that gives me, it's got push locks to the tank, and then hard line, and then push locks on the other end. And it is CAT inspected and approved. So then, to go from these hard lines to the fuel rail, you could dig through the junkyard and find some push locks that are the right length, like some flex line. That's fine. I kind of went with the easy route. I got some more crap that will probably burn my car down, but this is PTFE lined fuel line, which is the generic name for Teflon. So all it is has a Teflon liner that is impervious to allegedly everything. And if you're running E85, this is what you want. And these use different fittings than what you're used to. They're a little bit different. They have like an inner sleeve. I'll show you how to put these on, but you have to get PTFE specific fittings for these lines. Or buy the cheap kit like me and it comes with all the fittings, and then you probably will burn your car down again. So first thing I'm going to do, install this hard line in the car. It's going to bolt right in because I already checked it against the existing lines, and apparently all the second gens, the line is exactly the same bends. It's just whether it's push lock on the end or threaded. So it should be pretty easy to install. So I'll get that thrown in. So at the junkyard, they puncture gas tanks to drain all the gas out. So if you buy one, be aware that ahead of time, it's most likely going to have a hole in it, which I knew, but I didn't know if this was going to work. So instead of spending, I think it was around $90 on Rock Auto for a new gas tank, I spent $20 just to make sure everything was going to work first. So got the tank, might as well use it. So what I'm going to do is clean this up. I'm going to weld this shut, and then I'm going to weld a plate over the top, so that way I'm double welded. Shouldn't have any leaks or anything. I'll know pretty quick since it's on the bottom. Everyone's going to tell you you're an idiot if you try to weld a gas tank, and you're really not. I had 3 different people tell me that at the junkyard. It's not an issue, as long as you're safe and careful and not an idiot. Alright, here we are up under the car. I've already got my lines snapped into the original plastic brackets that I left in here. So I've got my push locks that are going to go to my tank. Should be right there. I've got the lines ran. And the only sort of mistake I made that I don't really care about is when I got these lines, I got them from an extended cab truck. And I have a regular cab truck, so I've got about, I've got about an extra 12 inches or whatever. So, which is okay. I kind of tweaked them up because I want to run my fuel lines up above the transmission so I stay away from my exhaust over here. So I've got these sort of bent for now. I'll make up a bracket and mount them. I'll get one of those clamps for the fuel filter here and attach that probably to the trans cross member. Just don't want my emergency brake cable rubbing through or anything, so get that more secured. But what I'm going to do now is attach my fittings. I've got my end here for my push lock, and what I've got are these adapters, and these go from 6AN to push lock. You need a 5/16 and a 3/8 if that's what your lines are, which they should be. Then you get some Vaseline, also called petroleum jelly, to lubricate just a little bit because there's O-rings up inside here that actually is what seals against this. So I like to lubricate with just a little bit of petroleum jelly, which is petrol, which is gasoline, which means it just dissolves if it gets in the gas. And then it just slides right on like that. Alright, so then once you have your fitting slid down to the stop, you take your other side, which is a little locking nut, and that goes on this side of the stop and threads up in there. And there's some cheaper adapters that use, it's the plastic push lock that looks OEM, but it is definitely not OEM. And I've used them and they leak really bad, so don't buy those. Spend the extra $5 and buy the screw together types. Definitely worth the money. So that's my 5/16. This one's going to be 3/8. Again, I'll pull that plastic piece off that I should have taken off before I stuck these in. There we go. Clean that a little bit. Lubricate it with petroleum jelly. Grab your fitting. Slide your fitting on. And sometimes on these fuel filters or other things, you have to put this lock nut on first because there's just not enough space. I've even seen some where there is no space and I couldn't even use fittings. And then if it's tight like that, screw a little, push on, screw a little, push on. You just want to make sure you're seated without having to tighten the nut all the way. Like I said, I've seen some where this distance is like way shorter and this piece won't even go on. And then you have to use usually OEM type plastic. So there's my two lines adapted to 6AN. Now I'm going to run my PTFE line from behind the engine above the transmission here, connect to the first line, and then I'll see where I need to cut it at my fuel rail. I got my first line coming from near the fuel rail. Screw it onto my adapter a little bit. Alright, now go up top and cut this. Alright, so now we're over at the vise with our freshly cut end. So I'm going to kind of squeeze it to straighten it out a little bit. Then I'm going to take a little bit of fire. I'm just going to hit it. And all I'm wanting to do is just fuse that outer nylon. You don't want to damage the Teflon, so you can use a lighter or whatever. And gently remove our tape, trying not to fray our outer sleeve. And that turned out pretty good. So now, first thing I'm going to do, take this apart. There's this little aluminum bushing in there. Hang on to that. Then I'm going to take this outer nut, which has a flared end. And this is the big difference between, well, there's a bunch of differences, but the Teflon and the non-Teflon type. So I'm going to slide this over the hose. Alright, so then the next thing is I'm going to separate the inner Teflon sleeve from the outer braided line. And you just want to gently get down in between the two, and it doesn't take much pressure. Kind of once you touch it and push it, it'll separate. And you don't want to go too much because you got to close this back up. And if you use something metal like a screwdriver, what's going to happen is you're going to get it down in there, you're going to poke it, you'll weaken the Teflon or poke a hole in it, then you go to start the engine up, and you made power steering lines or something, which I did, and they will explode. And they'll dump power steering fluid all over the ground and make you look like an idiot. I don't need any help with that. I'm already pretty good at it. So then you take your aluminum, and it's tapered on one end. Taper goes in. You want to get around the Teflon, but behind the stainless. Alright, so now I've got it fed down onto the Teflon with the stainless on the outside. And it might be hard to see, but the Teflon will seat up against the aluminum. There's a step inside there, so the Teflon isn't going to come out. It should be seated pretty evenly all the way around, depending on how straight your cut was. Now, one thing that can happen is Teflon is slippery, so when you're pushing this together, your pieces can move. And if they move out too much, then you're not going to get the right grip, I guess we'll call it. Plus we'll go to there, so 1.5 inches. So when we're done, that distance should be 1.5 inches to the mark. If that mark is moved, that means our tube or our hose has slid down the fitting and we're not gripping the correct amount of space. Alright, so then you slide this guy up. It's going to be difficult because I got tape on there, but twist it while you go up. Now this is the part where you can slip a lot, and when you're going over this, you want to make sure you're keeping pressure down on your fitting. And just spin it if you need to, and get it past that little bulge until it starts to thread. And then when you're getting this together, push up on your hose while you're pushing down on this fitting to keep them seated. Try to get that thread to catch. Alright, feels like the thread caught. So now what I'm going to do is clamp this in my vise. You can use a vise, or you can vise your wrench. And then that'll hold that end still. Now as I tighten this, I want this to be stationary, and then I'm going to push my hose the entire time to try to keep it seated. Alright, now it's tight. You don't need to go crazy. So now we'll double check our measurement. It should be 1.5 inches. And I still am. 1.5 inches. Then you take your same black marker and you cover up all your little scratches because you're too cheap to buy end wrenches. And there you go. That's basically how NASCAR does it. Yeah, look at that. Alright. So that hose is done. Ready to go on the car. Do the second hose and then we'll install these. Alright, so here's a final overview of the system. I've got my 6AN lines connected to the fuel rail going down on top of the transmission. Then up under the car they're coming from on top of the transmission, connecting to the hard lines. And then I got the stock hard lines ran back to the gas tank. So I've got the stock gas tank installed. This is the 98 Plus. This is the plastic rock shield, I guess, from the original 94, and it went right on. So I'm telling you, these tanks are identical.
So the only modification I had to make was on the vent overflow tube, which is the 3/4 inch diameter. I had to take it out of the stock 94 bracket, cut it a little bit shorter, and then it went right on the stock 98 and up gas tank. So everything's connected, everything's bolted on. Those are my 2 fuel lines right there. They're snapped up onto the Silverado sending unit. Last thing I need to do is get the wiring connector for the Silverado unit. I didn't grab it at the junkyard like an idiot, so next time I'm there I gotta grab one of those so I can wire the pump in. So that's it for the fuel system as far as all the mechanical connections and parts go.